Today on the ATL Box Score podcast, we get into why Georgia and Jim Chaney parted ways. Then we have Ab Stanley on from the three-point conversion to talk about Georgia Tech, Geoff Collins, Georgia Tech's recruiting strategy going forward. Then we have the quarterback whisperer on himself, Sean McAvoy, stops by to join the show to talk about Trevor Lawrence in the national championship, Jake Fromm, and when is it going to be his turn to win a national championship. Today is Football Friday here on the ATL Box Score podcast with Alex Berger. Hope you enjoy. Guys, I just want to tell you the biggest secret in the Atlanta business community. And I don't know why it's such a big secret, but I use them for all my resources to get my work done to promote my brand. And they are right off of Peachtree Street in midtown Atlanta. And if you're a small business owner, or you're trying to get your foot in the door in the Atlanta area, or you work from home, well, you need to check out Spaces Midtown East. And you're probably like, what Spaces? Well, Spaces is one of the premier brands in the co-working industry. And yes, the co-working industry has come up in the past couple of years. And I tell you, guys, I got to tell you this. If you're looking for office space, if you're looking for a place to do work and you're tired of coffee shops, you're tired of working out of your house, you need to check out Spaces Midtown. Yes, there's other attractive brands out there, and trust me, I've been part of them. Spaces is above the rest. And here to tell you more about Spaces Midtown, I actually have one of the managers there who's managed a lot of different centers, even with the Regis brand. But Steve is going to tell you more about, we have Steve Choi going to tell you more about Spaces Midtown.
Hey, Alex, thanks for that awesome introduction and that great compliment. What's great about you, Alex, is that you have truly used other providers out there, and I love that we continue to earn your business every time. Love seeing you and ATL Box Score here utilizing our space. So Space is a place where we invite people to work, meet, and connect with other like-minded individuals. We've designed our spaces to help promote creativity as well as networking and just innovative work styles. We have 8,000 square feet of collaborative space on our first floor at our Spaces Midtown East Center. And then we have about 40,000 square feet of private office space of various sizes on our second floor. So come on out, take a free test drive. If you mention Alex or ATL Box Score, we'll give you 5 days for free to come in and check it out for yourself to see what you think of Spaces.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you for those kind words. As always, love working with you and your friendly staff here at Spaces Midtown East. To find out more information, they are just a block north from the Fox Theater. If you've been to the Fox recently, you probably parked in their parking garage. But if you want more information, if you're interested in Spaces, I'm going to put the link to their website in the show description. Check out Spaces Midtown East. Well, welcome back to the ATL Box Score with Alex Berger. In case you're wondering, I am Alex Berger. Also joining me in this segment is Steve Choi.
What up, what up, what up?
You might know him from Choi to the World. Or that 48-hour film festival.
Or The Cool Boss.
The Cool Boss. Okay, for reference point reasons, Steve is a boss to some people. To some people, he isn't a boss. But anyways, when he talked to his counterparts, I'll just put it that way. Yes, his counterparts. Let me turn me down a little bit. He said one time he goes up to the front desk and he was like, "What up? What up?
What up? What up? It's the Cool Boss."
Then I mocked him and said, "So you're going, what up? What up? It's the Cool Boss." That's just one of our things. But man, it has been an interesting time here in football land.
Yes, sir.
I mean, a lot of different changes happening, and we haven't even played a game. I mean, the national championship happened, so congratulations to the Clemson Tigers for beating the Alabama Crimson Tide in the national championship game. Clemson just went out there and smacked them in the mouth, buddy. That's what they did.
Yeah, that was an awesome game, man.
Yeah, especially if you're a Clemson fan.
Well, even just the first quarter was just back and forth, and you were going to wonder what the heck.
Right. I was 38-13 going into halftime against Alabama. What?
Yeah. No, I don't think that was the halftime score. Was it? I thought it was still
Clemson was up
15.
by what's that?
I thought it was 16-15.
Clemson was up by a couple touchdowns.
It
was kind of like the SEC championship, and from a standpoint.
You're right. I'm thinking of the Chicago-Philly game or something.
You are thinking about that. That was a sad ending too, if you're a Chicago fan.
But a great ending if you're a Philly fan.
Duh, Bears.
Go Eagles.
Yeah. Also in the NFL, I think it's interesting. Cliff Kingsbury got fired as the Texas Tech head coach, and then got the SC offensive coordinator position. Now, pretty much, if you did well the SC offensive coordinator position, and I know SC's kind of in an unstable territory right now, that if they would fire Mr. Helton, then he could have possibly been a strong candidate to get that job. But Mr. NFL comes calling, and yep, Arizona Cardinals. That sounds pretty good to be a head coach there.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's going to work out. So, for the first time ever, I'm so grateful for Bruce Arians.
Yeah, Arians.
Arians?
Yeah.
Okay, that's how you said Arians?
Arians.
Okay. For Bruce Arians, because there were rumors out there that they were talking to Kirby Smart.
Wow.
I didn't think it would hold up. But at the same time, it made me kind of wondering, since there's a lot of transition right now going around in the Georgia program, and would Kirby be interested in that NFL money? I really thought that was a possibility for a second.
Yeah, you never know.
Right. But then it kind of led me to this point, and because I know I haven't heard anything, but I wouldn't be surprised if people are talking about, Dabo Sweeney and this job opening in the NFL or whatnot. But it's the thing I realized is that, first of all, a coach like Kirby Smart is a college guy. He's a college guy. Yeah, he spent some time. He had a stint with the Dolphins as as an assistant. Okay. But the only people that succeed in the NFL, unless you're Pete Carroll, which Pete Carroll is just on a different level, that he eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Yeah, you do that as a head coach and everything like that, or as a coach, period. But it's like he's fascinating all assets of football. That's why I feel like he's a successful NFL coach with having a long stint at USC and now with the Seahawks. But the people that succeed in the NFL are NFL guys. Guys that have been in the NFL for a long time.
What about Jim Harbaugh?
Jim Harbaugh's...
Yeah, he was.
I wouldn't say he was successful, though, with the Niners.
What? He went to the Super Bowl.
But, I mean, he had that 1 year.
No, he had several years. And then after the Super Bowl, it all fell apart.
But still, like...
He took a 2-14 team and turned them into conference contenders each year.
I feel like Jim Harbaugh was better off in college.
Michigan hasn't done much.
True.
I'm just throwing that out there. Just throwing it out there.
I give you that. But
rip the Niners. Rip the Niners. So
I see where you're coming from with that point, but
But he's the exception to the rule, right? Just like Pete Carroll.
Right.
The rule is if you come through a legacy and the chain of command, like the guys that coached under Bill Parcells, the guys that coached under Mike Holmgren, the guys that coached under Bill Walsh, all those guys became great head coaches.
Well, I think the thing about the NFL is, and that's why I say, if you're an NFL guy, you know that the culture and the expectations because you made a career in it.
Right.
But if you made your career in college is a different animal than the NFL. Just from a head coaching standpoint, I remember Spurrier talking about this because when he was with the Redskins, that he was used to, as a head coach in college, having total control over his program. That at Florida, there was no Game of Thrones. But there was a Game of Thrones in Washington because it's the Redskins.
Right.
And you're in the NFL, you're just given the title head coach. And that means you just coach, and the GM will give you who they give you, and you need to coach them up to the best of your abilities.
Makes sense.
In college, you're in control of who you recruit. You're in control of who you bring into the program. Now, I know a lot of head coaches in the NFL have relationships with GMs and everything like that. I don't think majority of the time that it's probably the best relationship. I don't think Thomas Dimitroff and Dan Quinn are buddy-buddy, even though they kind of seem like it.
Yeah.
That you're always going to have two difference of opinions. You're always, because if they had such a great relationship, why can't they draft right?
Exactly.
It's one ego going against another ego. And yeah, they know how to play the song and dance of how to look like we're getting along and stuff like that. And I think that's a lot of head coaches with a lot of other GMs. Bill Belichick is obviously the exception of the rule because you have to be super established like Bill Belichick to get your way with the front office.
Well, yeah, but when you're winning that many championships and you're in the postseason almost every single year, yeah, I mean, you're not necessarily the exception to the rule, but you've earned that.
Yeah, you earned that right to make those decisions.
I mean, remember Mike Holmgren was with the Green Bay Packers at his highest point was running things and calling all the shots.
Right, because he could.
Right.
Because the Packers were successful back then.
Right. So in those scenarios, yes. But they're not just going to hand over the keys to you. Unlike the Oakland Raiders did to to John Gruden.
Right.
Good old Chucky. Good old Chucky. You gotta hand it to John Gruden because
Spider wide.
all he did for the years that he's been retired from coaching is just talk about it, and they felt like, hey, this guy really knows his stuff. We better go hire this guy again.
Right. And ESPN with the young college quarterbacks talking about Spider 3 wide banana.
And well, hopefully he does well. I was a John Gruden fan when he was in Oakland, so
I'm still a John Gruden fan. I hope he does well.
Yeah, I'm looking. I mean, he's got it rough.
I just feel like your first season's your first season.
Right. And this is his first season after a million years away.
Right. So I think John Gruden will definitely get it right, but it's a Game of Thrones pretty much if you're a head coach.
Right.
In the NFL, and that's why I feel like Kirby Smart's better off where he is right now instead of trying to play the NFL game. Because that is a total, especially where he's at as a younger coach, like that's a total just mistake for your career at this point.
Absolutely.
I think, though, if Nick Saban, on the other hand, got into the NFL, which I don't think he wants to do that, and his wife has made it clear that they don't want to do that, so that's what Nick Saban's going to do. I do believe if Nick Saban ever went to the NFL, like I said, I don't think it's going to happen, that he would be one of those guys you give total control over to everything at first.
Makes sense.
Then if he's not successful, you probably take that stuff away. If he is, then you certainly worked out. So next we're going to get into Jim Chaney leaving the University of Georgia in the state of Georgia football. Now at the beginning of the week, shocking news, but when you think about it, it shouldn't be that shocking of a news. I actually really like this guy. My younger brother, David Berger, who I've had on the show, actually had a really great interaction with him because he's a middle school coach and he went to Georgia Coaching Clinic. But I think once you think about it, it's probably best for the Georgia program that this coach that they part ways, and that's Jim Chaney. Now, Jim Chaney has been all over the place. He's had Drew Brees at Purdue as his as one of his quarterbacks when he was a coordinator for Purdue, and recently, before he went to Georgia, he was at Tennessee. Now, for $4.8 million, he's going to go back to Tennessee. And I think this is probably a good sign where the program's at right now, and this is where you want to be if you're Georgia, just from the standpoint because Kirby Smart, obviously, he comes from the Nick Saban coaching tree, and one of the examples that Nick Saban sets as a coach, he's not one of these people that fires assistants. Yes, they have a lot of guys leave the program, and you have a lot of turnover in the coaching staff year after year after year. It seemed like for a long time it was a different OC each year, and somehow they'd still win national championships or still be one of the top teams in college football. Now, Nick Saban and his mindset is that he'll have a conversation with his certain coordinator and just be like, it's time for you to start looking for a job elsewhere. His way of firing him, but not firing him. I feel like this exact same thing happened with Jim Chaney. But possibly that both parties were sick of each other. Chaney's sick of Smart, and Smart getting tired of getting stopped in the red zone, if we're being completely honest. Because you saw that frustration that he had after the Kentucky, or during the middle of the Kentucky game, when Georgia got stopped 3 times on the 1, the 2, the 3 yard line. And that has to be really frustrating that you can't punch it in when you're that close. So something was going on. Now, the national championship game last year, you had some questionable calls. You had some questionable calls during the SEC championship game. And now it's all come to a head. And by the way, in the Sugar Bowl, y'all look terrible. The offensive production looked terrible. I get it that you have DeAndre Walker out. You don't have DeAndre Baker. You have a lot of younger guys on defense, and that's why Texas is just doing whatever they want to you, manhandling you. I get that. But you have no excuses on the offensive side of the ball, and for some reason on that day they couldn't click. They barely hit a deep pass. The only pass they could throw was intermediate. And the only significant yards that they got was after the catch. So you put together a terrible bowl game. And it's on you as a coach to get it right. Now James Coley today has been announced as their new offensive coordinator, which I think is a smart move because Coley and Chaney were co-offensive coordinators. I don't think Chaney really liked that, which, I mean, honestly, who wouldn't? So I feel really optimistic, even though they lost a lot of their upperclassmen when it comes to their skill players with Nada and McCall Hardman and Terry Godwin and all those guys. But it's like you look who they have coming back. They still have DeAndre Baker. You have James Cook. You have Tyler Simmons, and we're gonna finally see what Demetrius Robbins has, and so you got a lot of talent coming back. And by the way, you have Dominic Blaylock. I don't know if he's on campus right now, but that man is going to be pretty interesting to see how he develops. So you have a lot of you still have a lot of firepower on offense. So I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing with Jim Chaney. And it looks like Georgia's going to retain Sam Pittman because Sam Pittman's the key. Sam Pittman is the key to this whole thing, and recruiting. Like, I feel like that is one of the reasons why Georgia has an edge over recruiting, why Georgia gets so many good offensive linemen now. And why would you want to leave? Because right now it's not like the line has a lot of seniors on it. It's the opposite. It's very, very young. And why would you not want to see how those guys turn out and develop? I think if you leave right now just because your friend is leaving, I don't think that's necessarily a great thing when you don't really have a job. Because here's the thing, guys. I mean, coaches, they leave and everything like that, but it's like they leave when their guys are gone, where you're at a point where it looks like the program is going to have to start over. And on this offensive line, it's that same situation. So Sam Pittman is more valuable than Jim Chaney. I'm going to say that. And now that you have James Coley as the offensive coordinator, that's definitely going to help because he's been a tremendous recruiter since he's been at the University of Georgia. Because you got to look out. I mean, Tech thinks that they're going to recruit like Alabama. So definitely, I feel like Georgia overall is in a good position going on in the future. I'm not worried right now, and I don't think as a Georgia fan you should be worried at all. Now we're about to bring on Ab Stanley to talk about how Georgia Tech is going to have how they're going to recruit the Metroplex of Atlanta. Now we just want to welcome to the ATL Box Score podcast, Mr. Ab Stanley from the Third Point Conversion. Ab, how are you doing today? And happy New Year, since this is the first time I've gotten to talk to you in the new year.
Oh, I'm sorry. Happy New Year, Alex. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Just enjoying this nice sunny days with this cold, crisp breeze out here. So, can't have it anyway. At least it's nice and sunny.
Yeah. At least it's nice and sunny, but it actually feels like January now.
Yeah, for real.
Well, I just wanted to start off talking about Georgia Tech because they're making it seems like everyone nowadays, especially all the major programs in Georgia, are making some sort of coaching change or new hire. But Tech has pretty much stole the headlines this morning with Geoff Collins getting his staff together, and he had a press conference last week to just let the public know what Georgia Tech's going to look like and what they're going to do going forward in the future. And they recently hired Brent Key as their offensive line coach, who was Alabama's offensive line coach this past year. So, so far, Georgia Tech is moving in the right direction, making good positive steps forward. I just want to get what's your thoughts on the Georgia Tech program, especially with this Geoff Collins hire.
Yeah, Alex, and I want to say it was versus Wake Forest, where the Georgia Tech basketball team was playing Wake Forest last week, and
right.
The staff that was hired at that time came out and introduced themselves, and Collins himself came out and kind of addressed the crowd for a little minute at halftime. And the one key thing I heard in that little introduction was that he's going to bring a winning attitude. They're going to do it on the field, but they're going to do it in the recruiting battles. He specifically said that they were going to recruit. They're going to contend with the other schools in recruiting, keeping the talent inside of Georgia. And I remember last time we talked about it, that was one of the keys we were talking about with Georgia Tech hiring a new coach. Can they recruit in the state of Georgia and the surrounding states? So the addition of a guy like Keys now, I want to say he was one of Nick Saban's top assistants, not just offensive line coach, but he was also involved heavily in the recruiting process with Nick Saban. So, he's one of the guys that goes, gives a preliminary talk, maybe talks to the scouts and says, we want this guy from this side of the state. And he goes and talks about the Alabama way of life. And just being under Nick Saban and learning on the field, but that other key factor in recruiting off the field will definitely help a guy like Collins keep some of the talent in state, in the city, and even go into outer states, your Alabamas, your Tennessees, your Floridas, your Louisianas, and so forth. So a guy like Brett Key, that was a great hire. He's added guys, he's added other guys, but I think Key in particular, that was somebody he wanted to give it a little bit of legs, a little bit of stability, I would say, because he's a guy who has recruited. He's a guy who has won national titles with Nick Saban.
And surprisingly, that both of them were on the Alabama staff back in 2007 and have a relationship because of both. One of them played at Georgia Tech, and the other one was one of the assistants there. So there's a lot of history, and it seems like Geoff Collins is bringing a lot of Georgia Tech people back to Georgia Tech.
Yeah, if you go down the list of some of the coaching changes he's made, he's definitely want to get guys who are familiar with the program, familiar with the city. I look at Tashard Choice as him being a running backs coach, and that just points to getting the fans, getting the students, getting the Georgia Tech alumni, getting everybody involved with the program kind of back into, hey, we're Georgia Tech football. We're in the ACC. We're a big-time program. We want to see fans at the games. We want the games to be sold out. We want people in the state of Georgia to see one of their own in their houses when it's time to recruit. They're showing Tashard Choice. He's going on like midnight recruiting runs with some of the hopefuls coming into college, and that's what you want. You see a guy who's made it at Georgia Tech, who came to the program, who did what he had to do at the program, and then made it to the NFL and, played for the Dallas Cowboys. I can't remember if he played for any other team, but the Cowboys player, and that's a guy you see on TV. That's a guy you've seen on TV. That's a guy, if you're an 18-year-old, 17-year-old going into college, your parents probably saw him play in the league and in college, and they could tell you stories. I remember Tashard Choice, and that's why you want those guys. You want those guys to bring up great feelings of history. You want to reminisce about the good old days of Tech football. When you're having spring games, you want to bring in old alumni to the game because you want the fans and you want the alumni, to be behind the program. So these are choice hirings. By getting people familiar with the city, familiar with the fan base, familiar with the state, you bring more of a sense of fellowship, of this is a family, this is Georgia Tech football, and you're keeping it within the family.
Now, what's going to be like the pitch or the selling point with Georgia Tech? Because obviously Clemson, Alabama, Florida, all those guys that recruit the Atlanta metro area pretty hard have the selling point of pretty much like, if you're good enough to play here, you're good enough to play in the league, and that's not necessarily the case with Georgia Tech, or at least it hasn't been the past couple of years. So what's the selling point that's going to make Georgia Tech attractive for a four-star player?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like, a seedy businessman or a bookie on the wrong side of Vegas, but you're going to sell the city of Atlanta. You understand? Because everything else, if I'm a recruiter from Georgia Tech, I can tell you this. Yeah, Georgia's national title game, Alabama winning national titles, LSU, Auburn, all those teams, they're in the mix. But Georgia Tech is on TV. We're on TV every week. And what I would tell a incoming recruit is, you can be a part of the change. You can be the guys in the locker room when Georgia Tech turns into that powerhouse football team. Remember, this is going to be a new offense. This is not going to be triple option. Georgia Tech games are not going to be people watching and not seeing passes. Collins is going to tell these young kids, hey, I've hired this staff. We're going to open up the offense. We want to have more of a pro-style offense. And what he can promise some young guys, especially this year, is you can be the change. You can be the difference at Georgia Tech. When Georgia Tech turns it around, you could be the team, the 2019 team that won the ACC or whatever. Whatever delusions of grandeur he has to tell these kids, it's true. It's not far fetched, because if he recruits the right guys and they do turn it around, Georgia Tech is in a big time conference, and they're not in the boondocks somewhere deep in the backwoods of Georgia. They're in the middle heart of the city of Atlanta. Atlanta is a vibrant city that's just getting more and more illustrious as the years go on, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And, you want to tell a young kid, do you want to go into the backwoods, where nobody might not know where you are and your family can't come visit? You want to be right in the heart of Atlanta. Your family take a bus into the city, or a plane right into the biggest airport in the world, in the country, I should say, and come visit you, So you're going to sell the city of Atlanta, but what you're really selling is you can be the name of change at Georgia Tech. You could be the name of the first offense that put up so much points because they threw it such and such amount of times as opposed to running it every game. You can be the defensive guy that put up these numbers in this season when Georgia Tech football came back to being old school Georgia Tech football. So right at this moment, these guys, and I'm not a recruit, I'm not into recruiting visits, but that's what I would be promoting. The two most things is you're promoting change and you're promoting the city. Because if we're being honest, getting on TV and showcasing your skills, they could have done that last year at Georgia Tech.
Yeah,
Georgia Tech was on TV a lot, you know, so it's not, you don't have to sell too hard. Hey, I'm Power 5 conference, this is Georgia Tech. We'll be playing big-time schools. We'll be playing Clemson. We'll be playing Virginia Tech, you know. We'll be playing Miami, you know. So you wouldn't really have to sell them hard on them showcasing their skills for NFL team. But what you would want to sell them hard is why this is the destination for you to showcase your skills. And this is the destination to showcase your skills because Atlanta, the city, is rising, and you can be part of the change at Georgia Tech.
Well, let me ask you this then. How long do you think it's going to take for them to change the culture there and to put together a decent team that could possibly get 10 wins? Because I saw something on social media where they're inducing all like the new coaches and everything like that, and every one of them seemed like they had I had a scream speech that they want to inject new energy into this program. And I get that it's like you want to recruit like Alabama and you want to do all this thing. That's all said and that's all nice and everything like that, but also too, like I also see that it's like Georgia Tech's academics aren't really going to change, and this was honestly a strugglesome part for Paul Johnson. Granted, Paul Johnson had a mindset that give me whoever you can get, and I can turn him into a decent football player. But that just doesn't work in 2019.
Well, there will always be a setback to go into a school. Maybe you go to Alabama and you're the third best quarterback there, even though you're the top-rated quarterback coming out of high school. You know, you go to another school, there's always going to be a setback. But I always go back to the teams like Stanford. You know, they have a higher academic standard than, I guess, and maybe Georgia Tech, maybe even higher than that. But there are teams that have high academic standards that still recruit good players. You know, there are still good football players that do great inside of the classroom as well. So that would be another challenge that I would portray, that I would give to one of the incoming recruits is, you know, you're a great student too. Would you like to have a higher education as well as further your football career? Would you take the challenge of higher academics than, let's say, an easier school? You know, all of that reflects on a child. You understand what I mean? And that shouldn't hinder you from getting the type of players you want. You may not get the best quarterback coming out, but that shouldn't hinder you from getting a top quarterback, especially from the state of Georgia where they seem to just come out, you know, in drones, good quarterbacks, and they go to other schools. The thing that you want to do is you want to challenge the parents and the student to not shy away from the academics. Because, again, if we talk about all that stuff we just talked about in why you would come to Georgia Tech, then if you have the top academics, you have the academics to qualify for the scholarship, and you have the academics to keep up with the schoolwork and whatever, then that shouldn't shy you away from coming to Georgia Tech. That's what a coach like Collins would have to portray to these young guys coming in. And maybe a guy like they can help with that. A guy like Tashard Choice could help with that. It's like, hey, listen, I went there. You know, Tashard Choice, I went to school here. Like you said, it's not going to change, and it hasn't changed. So it's like guys can go there. They can have good careers. They can go to the NFL. The academics shouldn't hinder that. And I don't think it will. And when you ask how long it would take, ideally you want to give the coach his full 3 or 4 years from his first recruiting class to his fourth one. But to me, it shouldn't take that long. There's a team that went on a little run in the ACC. I want to say it finished with 7 wins. I can't remember exactly how many wins. It was 7 wins, right? They made a bowl game, right? And I remember going to a couple of games early in the season. 7 wins at one point in the season seemed far-fetched. And it wasn't that early in the season. Like 7 wins. They went on like a 3 or 4 game winning streak to get up there at the end of the season. 7 games at one point seemed far-fetched. They were like 1-3 or 2-4. I can't remember what it was. And I watched them play a game what was that? The Kentucky game, the Duke game. They gave up like 3 scores at the end of the third quarter. The game was tight. They gave up like 3 scores at the end of the third quarter, and then it gave up at the end of that game. So it's like I didn't think they would even win that many games. So we're talking about a team where they have done fairly well recruiting for the system that they wanted. So Collins is coming in and changing the system. The academics and stuff shouldn't hurt him from getting the players he wants for the system. It'll really come down to, is he really that good of a developer of players? Because I think they're going to get the players they want. I think they're going to target players, and especially in next year's recruiting class. I just think they got off on a slow start this year. They got off too late.
Right.
But next year's recruiting class should be eye-opening. I'm not going to say they're going to have the top recruiting class in the country, but I think next year's recruiting class will be much higher on the list than previous Georgia Tech recruiting classes.
Do you think that they're ever going to get to the level that Alabama's at?
Well, here's the best thing about these assistant coaches that he's hired. Here's the best thing. You play in the ACC. You don't play in the SEC. What everybody fails to realize is there's a reason why Dabo Swinney, there's a reason why Urban Meyer, there's a reason why those guys have good teams, really competitive teams in conferences that are not the SEC. Is because they try to draft those same type of athletes. They try to draft. They say the SEC is the cream of the crop when it comes to football. I happen to agree with that. You know, you can't just deny how the teams look, how the players look. You know, it's not the offenses are so intricate or the defense. It's just the players. Realistically, it's like the players are bigger, stronger, faster in the SEC. And you see little blips of that in other conferences, you know, and it's 1 or 2 teams maybe built a team. They say they built an SEC team like team. Well, that's what Georgia Tech can do. Like, they have that option. They're in the city where those athletes, you know, they come from in the South. They're in the middle of the heart of the South where you can go to Florida, you can go to Alabama, you can go to Louisiana, you can go to Tennessee, you can go to North Carolina. You can get these athletes that play cornerback, that play running back, that play wide receiver, that play linebacker. You see what I mean? And you can build teams like an Alabama, like an LSU, like an SEC team. Now, when you say they ever get to a level like Alabama, Alabama's the best team in college football. They just lost a national title, and I'd still put them number 1 in college football, wouldn't you? You see what I mean? Like, will they get to the level of Alabama? Will they get to the level of Clemson? I don't know. Can Geoff Collins build a winner at Georgia Tech? Yes. Can he build a team that contends for a playoff spot? Yes. It's the ACC. You know, you build a team that's right with these athletes that I'm talking about, and you're right there with Clemson because, like I said, they won 7 games with the offense, the triple option. You know, a defense that was kind of lacking. They won 7 games in the ACC with that type of team. If you get that wide open offense that's balanced and throws and runs, you get some defenders in here that can put a licking on somebody, and you get that Bobby Dodd Stadium rocking, man. He could have a real winner there if he does the right recruiting, and he's the guy that everybody thinks he is, developmental-wise.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now I just want to shift gears with now talking about the Atlanta Falcons because
the
Falcons got rid of Steve Sarkisian, and they hired our old friend who just got let go at Tampa, Derek Cutter. What's your thoughts about that? Because to me, it's probably the safe choice to get as a offensive coordinator to work with Matt Ryan.
Correct. And this is what you don't want to do. Matt Ryan, for whatever reason, gets pummeled by his Falcons fans. They they all still have delusions of grandeur. They wanted Michael Vick, and then they want the new prototype Michael Vick or whatever. If you always hear Atlanta fans who don't like Matt Ryan, they talk about stuff that they just don't talk about with other quarterbacks. Like he's not mobile enough, and he's not this, and he's not. It's like, guys, listen. Matt Ryan is one of the better quarterbacks in the league. That's not up for debate. That's not my opinion. That's just a fact. You don't want to keep fiddling with this guy's playbook. You don't want to keep changing what this guy's routine is. And when they keep switching offensive coordinators, it happens. He suffered tremendously when Kyle Shanahan left.
Right.
Not a little bit. He suffered tremendously. They went from a team that averaged, I want to say, 31 points a game. Matt Ryan wins the MVP, goes to the Super Bowl. NFL record 13 different receivers caught a touchdown pass in this man. They went to a team 2 years ago, to a team last year that if they scored 20 points, and there's a big if in front of that if they scored 20 points. And if they scored 20 points, they would win the game. Now, how do you fall off like that? It's a different philosophy. Sarkisian came in, and you can't put it all at his feet, but you can put most of it at his feet because the offense just didn't look good. Now the offense looked better this year, but it wasn't balanced. You know, the Falcons were like 31st or 32nd in rushing, right? And it's not like you didn't have good running backs. I know Freeman, you got hurt. Coleman is an adequate backup. The Ito Smith kid was a breath of fresh air. So there's no reason you should be last or at the bottom of the league in rushing. Sarkisian was trying to outthink the room. And again, you cannot just lay it at his feet. A lot of this blame has to go at Dan Quinn's feet. You cannot be a head coach for 2 or 3 seasons and not know what you want in certain situations. You cannot be a head coach for 2 or 3 seasons, gone to a Super Bowl, and not be able to grab your offensive coordinator and say, I want this kind of play. Bill Belichick doesn't run the offense and defense in New England. He runs the team, right? I guarantee you when he wants, he grabs Josh McDaniels and says, listen, we want some runs in this drive. I guarantee you when he wants, he grabs the defensive coordinator, Flores, I believe his name is, and says, listen, we want a couple of blitzes on this drive. He just doesn't leave it up to chance. He hires the right guy, yes. So, but you have to be accountable as the head coach. Dan Quinn has a lot to answer for. You can't fire Steve Sarkisian and then say, well, I let him run the offense. Some of that has to be laid at your feet. So when you said the word safe with Dirk Cutter, it's tremendously the safe pick. He knows, and I want to say they hired Mike Mularkey back too, right? Those are two guys that were right. Those 2 guys on the staff that Matt Ryan knows. They're not going to change what Matt does. And guess what? They will both help with a balanced offense. They're not next year. I guarantee you, the Falcons will not be last in the league in running or near the bottom. You want to balance out the offense. You want to keep familiarity with Matt Ryan. So Dirk Cutter, Mike Mularkey, those are great hires.
Yep. Well, unfortunately, we ran out of time. So we'll have to talk more about this Falcons stuff a little bit later. But Ab, where can we find your stuff? Where do you where's your place online where you write your articles, and how can we reach out to you on social media?
Okay. Again, I'm Ab Stanley. I'm the senior writer for the 3pointconversion.com. You can find me on Facebook as Ab Stanley, A-B Stanley, on Twitter as Ab Stanley, and on Instagram at Ab Stanley, the 3-point conversion.
All right. Well, thank you, Ab, for coming on the show today.
All right, man. Thank you, Alex. You have to take it easy, right?
All right. You too.
All right. Bye.
Now we're about to bring on a friend of the show, Mr. Sean McAvoy, and we're going to talk about Trevor Lawrence, get into some Jake Fromm discussion, and get his opinion also too on how he thinks Matt Ryan's going to benefit from having Dirk Cutter back in Atlanta. Well, now we have a special treat for you guys since it is Football Friday, and we thought we'd bring on the quarterback whisperer to talk about Trevor Lawrence and just football stuff. So I just want to welcome Mr. Sean McAvoy. Just want to wish him a happy New Year's. And I saw on Instagram that you spent your New Year's in Disney World.
Yeah, man, Alex, good to talk to you, pal. Yeah, we got around, took the kids down to Disney over New Year's, which was wild and crazy, but a ton of fun. So, yeah, it's good to be back home.
Well, that's great. Yeah, and it looks like you're back to the grind of training quarterbacks.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, we had a bunch of our college guys back after their bowl games and got to spend some time with those guys. And most of them are back to school now. And so all our high school guys kind of starting up our off-season training program this week. So just keep it rolling.
All right. Well, I just want to ask you about the national championship game, because that seems to have took a lot of the headlines this week, and especially about Trevor Lawrence and his performance. And I just want to know from you, watching that game, what was it that just set him apart? Because you don't get to live and talk about that you scored 44 points against Alabama defense every day.
Yeah, it was unreal. I mean, they just got rolling off the bat. You know, really surprising, I thought, really the ineffectiveness of Alabama's defense. You know, they for so many years have been so, you know, great up front, especially the front seven type of defense that would just take over games, right? Put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, put him in uncomfortable situations, and you didn't see any of that. You know, obviously a guy like Quinn Williams probably going to be a top draft pick here. You know, that's the type of guy that normally single-handedly makes an impact on the game, and instead you see Trevor Lawrence just standing what felt like all day in the pocket. And obviously he's a super talented quarterback. You give him that kind of time and let him feel comfortable, and he just starts picking you apart. And that's really what we ended up seeing. Obviously, any ball that wasn't perfectly thrown, Justin Ross just went out and made the catch anyway. But they were just, it seemed like that offense was just able to get into a rhythm, and it didn't seem like there was anything Alabama that was doing that confused them at all.
Mm-hmm. 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 Do you feel like them running a lot of vertical routes put a lot of stress on Alabama's secondary?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you know, it's what, you know, Coach Sweeney had said in the beginning, right? When he said the reason that we're going with Trevor Lawrence instead of Kelly Bryant, you know, was the ability to stretch the field vertically, right? That's what they felt that Trevor Lawrence did differently. And then even back then in week 4, you know, he kind of alluded to the fact that for us to win a championship, we needed to be able to do that. You know, obviously they have a really good running back there in Etienne, but to be able to complement that well, the ability to stretch the field, make a defense kind of cover you, you know, 53 yards wide and 60 yards deep, you know, puts a lot of stress on those 11 guys on defense. And that's what you saw. I think it was their game plan going in. You know, it's hard to play the run with 7 and also defend the potential to have 4 verticals down the field. And it seemed like Alabama was putting that bind all day long. And like I said, to Trevor Lawrence's credit, he took advantage when they found weakness in the secondary.
Mm-hmm. Now, usually with a true freshman, I mean, this is the first true freshman to win a championship in a long, long time, but it's happened before. I just want to know, because obviously you're not really wanting to throw a true freshman out there if you don't have a great offensive line, because I feel like this is part of the story that it's not that many people are talking about. Yes, he did have a spectacular game, throwing for over 300 yards, 3 TDs, and everything like that. But just tell me, or just give me your opinion about the line that Clemson has.
Yeah, well, you know, like I said, just to be able to handle, you know, just Quinn Williams by himself. And, you know, I spent a lot of stuff on Twitter the last couple of days breaking down him as a as a pro prospect, but what they showed was a lot of the film and how Clemson was able to handle him and, you know, just sliding their protections over to take care of him. Clearly they had a game plan going in because they probably had that same concern that, you know, that you brought up is, okay, we know Trevor Lawrence, really phenomenal player, but in this big moment against the best team we've played all year, you know, how is a freshman going to stand up to it if he gets constant pressure from a good Alabama defense? And I imagine going into the week, that was point number one, was we have to try to keep the pocket clean. We have to give Trevor an opportunity to throw the ball. So the holding Alabama defense with no sacks and really very little pressure whatsoever, you have to give a big compliment to the front O-line of Clemson. You know, going in, there were some question marks about would they be able to hold up that task, but clearly I think that was the difference.
Right. It definitely seems like it, and it definitely seems like that those guys aren't getting a lot of credit out there. I'm just wondering because it seems like Trevor has a very quick release. How do you develop that into a quarterback?
Yeah, you know, he's been such a standout since he was a freshman in high school. You know, and guys that are around this Georgia area, you know, have known about him for a while now and are probably the least amazed at how well he played on a big stage because you could just kind of see it coming. You know, obviously he played a lot of football at a high level at Cartersville High School and played in 3 state championships games and won all 3 his first 3 years of high school. And so when you start as a 4-year starter in Georgia, when you're playing a lot of talent, you know, you've gotten a lot of really good high-level experience. And, you know, I think it just builds from there. You know, he's obviously has, you know, that big, tall, lean body, which creates a lot of natural fluidity in his throwing motion. I know he's a kid that played multiple sports as a kid and developed from a young age, you know, the repetition it requires to be nice and efficient with his arm path. You know, that being said, he's not perfect. He's kind of a little bit of a ball dropper, and that's been criticized a little bit over the last year, where he'll kind of drop the ball down, almost like Tim Tebow is a little bit. But something because his arm accelerates so quickly, he's able to overcome. But the key is that he's doing the same thing every time. So he's got a consistency in the way he throws the football, which has led to the great accuracy he has.
Right. Now, on the other side of this is the first time we saw Tua ever have a bad game at Alabama. The only close bad game he had was the SEC championship, but obviously he had to go out because of an injury to that. But do you feel like the injury part was a factor, or but it seemed like it seemed like Clemson just always sent like 6 or 7 guys on a blitz.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson's defense did what I think a lot of people were expecting Alabama's defense was going to do. I mean, you know, the constant pressure on the quarterback. Obviously, you know, Brent Venables has been highly regarded as a D coordinator for years, you know, a guy that every team seems to want and probably a big head coaching prospect here in the next year or two. But they just consistently brought pressure on Tua. Obviously, you shut down the run game. Obviously, the 2 interceptions, you know, even scoring a touchdown. I mean, you know, they did everything and just really took the game over. But I do. When you look at Tua, I think you have to look back to, you know, that ankle and you know, over the last 3 or 4 games he played, he certainly didn't seem like the same Tua, you know, that was going to run away with the Heisman Trophy the first 6 or 7 games of the season. So you wonder if maybe his mobility was cut down a little bit, or he didn't trust his ability to get outside of the pocket and run. You certainly saw a lot less of that the last few games of the season. But sometimes it's as simple as, you know, he finally played really good defenses. Right. You know, we talked all year long about how he never played in the fourth quarter and they won every game by 30 points. And you know, a lot of that was, you know, Alabama didn't play a ton of great teams throughout the year, at least great teams with great defenses. And then so suddenly when you play the best defenses you've played all year, in Georgia, in the SEC championship game, and then obviously Clemson, he struggled, which is what you expect, right? You expect it to be harder against better defenses. So maybe you're seeing a little bit of where Tua really is. Maybe he's not quite as great as the guy he looked like he was in, one half of the championship game last year, or playing, lesser teams during the year. Now, I don't think he's as bad as maybe he looked in the national championship game either. He's probably somewhere in the middle there. But, I think that the ankle probably held him back a little bit. Mm-hmm. But really it was the decision-making that was confusing. I mean, talking about a guy who always seemed to make the right reads and didn't seem to get fooled and put the ball in good spots. I mean, coming right off the bat there with the pick six and just a bad decision and a bad throw, you really start to question. And then he comes back later, throws the touchdown and rebounds, and, it looks like there's going to be a shootout, and then, tries to throw, a vertical route into what was basically triple coverage, right? Just decisions you didn't see him making earlier in the year, a little bit of a head scratcher. But yeah. I chalk a lot of that up to just, the different looks that Venables was creating and how good the Clemson defense played.
Well, it seems like this year, because Alabama hasn't really faced a lot of top 10 defenses, but the times they faced top 10 defenses in LSU, Georgia, and now Clemson, that Tua seemed to struggle. Yeah, it's exactly right.
I think when you're Alabama, we think back with Jalen Hurts and all the success he had, his first couple of years at Alabama, and whether people were high on Jalen Hurts' ability or not, what you always said was just Alabama as a team was so good, where he didn't have to do a lot, right? They could run for 10 yards a play if they wanted to. They didn't need to be efficient in the pass game. And, you could say some of that early this season as well. As, Tua, I think, was a product of how great overall the Alabama team was. So when you can run the ball effectively, it makes throwing the ball a lot easier. And we talked about this, earlier on the year on one of these podcasts where, not to take anything away from what Tua was doing, but he certainly didn't have to make a lot of big-time throws in key situations, right?
Right, right.
And now when he was pressed to do that, obviously it becomes a little bit more difficult. Now, Tua, I still think is an exceptional quarterback, but he's also a young one, which is a funny thing to say when the freshman outplays him,
compared
right?
him to Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, but it's just the reality. I mean, I think you're still talking about probably two of the top 5 quarterbacks in all of college football.
Right.
And Tua being outplayed by Trevor Lawrence certainly isn't a shot at Tua's ability.
It seems like the progression for a college quarterback, especially when you start as either a true freshman, redshirt freshman, it seems like your freshman year, you're on fire because everything's new to you and the coaches aren't expecting you to win the game. And then you go into your sophomore year, and then you have more expectations because of your freshman year, and it's kind of like you get a little bit into that sophomore slump sometimes, but it's not. It's the level of play wasn't there like it was your freshman year. Then you get into your junior season, and you either look like a number 1 pick or look like you're gonna make a big impact in the NFL draft. And then if you stay for your 4th year, your junior year kind of looks like your senior year, depending on who stays on your team at that point or who you have at skill players.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And, like you said, it's because there's a lot more knowledge about you, what you do well, what you don't do as effectively, and obviously defenses can use that against you. Same thing we talk about in the NFL, all the time, too. You see quarterbacks that, maybe like a Lamar Jackson who's doing some really good things, in his rookie year. But, okay, now next year when defenses have seen him play and they know what he does well and what they can take away, let's see how he comes back in his 2nd year, right? Something we talk about a lot at all the different levels. And I think a lot of that's true. But I really do. I think it was the injury down the stretch. It seemed to affect his mobility a little bit. You didn't see him making plays with his feet that were a big part of of things that helped him in key situations in the last couple years. And, you think, like, I keep going back to the national championship game last year, and, all everybody talks about is obviously the touchdown pass at the end to win it. But, there was that, like, 3rd and 14, where it looked like he was going to take a sack, and that was going to be the end of the game, and he wriggles away from it and runs for a first down. I mean, that's the play of the game.
Right.
And he was ability to do that with his feet. I wonder in a similar situation if he had the ability to do that this year with whatever, was going on with his ankle. I mean, you're talking about a guy who had surgery between the SEC championship game and the college football playoff, right? So there's obviously he's not at 100% there. But like I said, I don't think that was the sole difference maker, but certainly something that had to have affected him.
Well, it always seems like with guys coming out of high school playing the quarterback position that it's like they're used to running in high school because they can. And then it's like, even though they're going to be labeled as like a pocket passer, but it's like that freshman year in college, that's sort of your instinct. So even though you're known for being a pocket passer, you'll still try to run when you're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I think guys, whatever they feel most comfortable with, right? Like you said, that's always been there. If things get bad, this is what's always saved me in the past. Right? There's always kind of something I go to. And I think there's some truth to that. And once again, it's the same thing at the next level. It's what, the changes that Russell Wilson had to make, and, maybe Mike Vick never quite did, and maybe RG3 never quite did, right? And, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson and those guys, if Kyler decides to play football here. But, I think that's right. I think you have to realize that the talent that you're playing against on defense is a lot faster and a lot quicker and obviously a lot more physical than what you played at a previous level. And then that has to therefore change the way you play the game as well as a quarterback. I always talk about, because I work with a lot of dual threat quarterbacks, and I really think there's obviously, those guys have that little extra, but you have to think of that in that sense. It's just a little extra. It's like icing on the cake, in my opinion. That if you have that little bit of extra to make a play with your feet when everything else kind of breaks down, that's what a great dual threat quarterback can give you that maybe just a true pocket guy cannot. But to think that you're going to live there, out on the edge running, I think that's where, the guys that don't quite get over the hump and make the big plays. Because at the end of the day, you have to make throws in the pocket. You have to be accurate and make good decisions. And, I think that's what you see a lot from Tua. Obviously, you see it from Trevor as well.
That's interesting, the icing on the cake. Now, I just wanted to, since we haven't had you on the show this year, but what does Jake Fromm have to do to get to that next level of winning a championship?
Yeah, isn't that the question?
Yeah.
Because when I said that Tua and Trevor were two of the best 5 quarterbacks, I think Fromm is in that group as well. I think he's that talented. He certainly can make every throw, and you've seen it throughout the year. He's a guy that, like we talked about earlier, had to make a transition from his freshman season to his sophomore, and same idea. The defenses knew more about him and what he liked and maybe how to stop him, and I thought he had a tremendous season this year, right? And then you get to the SEC championship game and, couldn't quite get it done, right? Similar to the national championship game last year. Now, that being said, those are 2 games that, I think very easily are wins. I don't think you can take away anything that he did. Basically, both of those games they had won, and let Alabama kind of take the, win the game there at the end.
Which I don't think is necessarily his fault. That's more of a team thing.
I agree. No, I'm agreeing with you 100%. It's just funny to hear, the knock. Oh man, he's really good, but maybe he doesn't have the enough, and that was kind of the funny thing with the whole Justin Fields back and forth. Well, maybe Justin has that little extra because he can, like we talked about, the icing on the cake, the extra ability to make plays with his feet, maybe that's what you need to get over the top, right? That's always kind of been the conversation around the Georgia program the last year. But I don't believe that's true. I think Fromm has shown the ability, and really I think where he showed it was last year in the semifinal game against Oklahoma, right, where they were just going back and forth. You know, basically you were in a game where you had to score every time you had the ball, and that's exactly what Fromm did, right? It's not like he's already proven, you know, in the national championship game last year, in the SEC championship game against Auburn last year, and then, you know, in the SEC championship this year, that he's a guy that can score points. You know, he's certainly not just a game manager type. It's not like he can throw 1 or 2 touchdown passes and that's it. I mean, he's a guy that if you need him to throw 35 times a game, I think he's the guy that can do that and be successful. So,
absolutely.
You know, I just think it's another year of growth and development. You know, understanding his protections a little better because he's not a guy that can get out on the edge and make plays with his feet. I think he's really got to be aware of where his pressure's coming from, where his hot routes are. You know, finding ability to take a few less sacks next season and get the ball out quicker and just be aware of some things there. But there's, like I said, it's a great, there's every other team in the country, you know, with the exception of maybe Clemson, you know, would love to have Jake Fromm as their quarterback.
Right.
So I think he's just primed to get better each year. And then obviously with all the supporting cast around Georgia, I think they'll be just fine.
Now, let me ask you this, because obviously right now on the Georgia offense, there's a lot of change that's happening. You're going to have a new coordinator. All your skill players that you throw the ball to that were juniors this year are going to the NFL. You're going to have a really good offensive line, and you're also going to have decent talent with your running backs.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you, do you feel like since Fromm's going to move into his junior year, do you feel like having younger skill players is going to be a positive for him? Because the way I see it as a positive is that they know that with a upperclassman, they might question Fromm because he's an underclassman, but now that's kind of all gone out the window. They know that Jake Fromm is the guy, and that this is his offense now, and there's no question about that.
No, I think there's probably some truth to that. I don't know how many guys are really doubting his ability this past year. You know, I think after what he did his freshman year and bring him all the way to the national championship game, that people were pretty much, you know, confident in his ability. So I don't know if there was some of that second guessing going on, but no, you're right. I mean, obviously the running back talent's always there, you know, regardless. I don't care how many guys they lose, they always seem to have it coming right up the pipeline, and no different going into next year. But obviously with Jim Chaney leaving, you know, talking about changing the play caller is it going to be significant? You know, and there's people in the Georgia fan base that feel like this is the move they need to get over the hump. You know, the reason they lost the last 2 games, in some people's opinion, isn't Jake Fromm's inability to do something. It's maybe the way the game was called with the league late, right? Similar to what, you know, the knock on the Falcons was when they lost the Super Bowl to the Patriots, right? So Georgia fans know this stuff all too well. So, you know, a lot of people think that maybe they need a guy who's a little bit more aggressive in key moments and, you know, can open things up a little bit more, and maybe the way Chaney calls the game is a little too stale or a little too, you know, not exciting enough to win these big high-scoring games. But, you know, I'm assuming it's going to be James Coley, you know, who's moved over and did the quarterbacks this year and worked with the receivers and has been an OC in the past. And so assuming that it is Coley that takes over, you know, he's a guy that has a reputation for being a lot more kind of passing game oriented. So I think you'll see that continue to open up a little bit. And, you know, I think it'll be interesting. But yeah, like you said, they're losing a lot. And it seemed like, a week ago that everybody you could name was leaving Georgia, as if something was going bad there. But you realize on all the guys they have left and the young talent they're going to have.
Yeah.
And like you said, whether they did it this year or not, they'll continue to, look at Jake Fromm as their leader. And he's the type of guy that should kind of, get everybody on the page they need to be in to have success next year.
Yeah, absolutely right. No, I just want to talk, to end out the conversation, I just want to talk about the Falcons because now they bring a familiar offensive coordinator that they had a couple of years ago when they were trying to make a run at the Super Bowl. Not the year they went to the Super Bowl, but then they were trying to make a run at the beginning back in 2012. Derek Cutter is now the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons, and he's a familiar face to the Falcons organization. How much of that is an advantage for the Falcons, and especially working with Matt Ryan?
I think that's the biggest key, is somebody who has a comfort level with the quarterback, right, and vice versa, someone Matt Ryan feels very comfortable with. And then even bringing a guy like Mike Mularkey as well, right? Like, you got all these former, OCs and guys who have done it at a high level. I think that certainly helps to have, obviously, some guys with some different ideas than maybe we had with Sarkisian, and maybe they feel like they're getting closer to what they had with Shanahan, and obviously Shanahan and Matt Ryan working together so closely. And so bringing back the familiar face in Cutter, I think, is certainly key. Throughout this is the problem that the NFL has. Well, not like the NFL has, but each individual team is that as soon as you get a great coordinator, they're gone the next year because they're going to have a head coaching opportunity, right? And and you've seen it at a lot of these top teams, and it's especially hard on the quarterback. As a Bears fan, I saw it with Cutler all those years. I thought Cutler had an opportunity to really be, super talented. Just with a different OC every year, it's hard to kind of mesh. And unfortunately, you've seen that with Matt Ryan now the last few years, of having to consistently change and build a relationship with a new guy. So I think this is best case scenario. You felt like you needed a different viewpoint than you had with Sarkisian. Plus, you get the comfort level with Cutter. It'll be interesting. I think they're trying to find some of the magic they had when Cutter was here prior. And obviously he knows all the time. He knows Julio, and he knows kind of how to get those guys the best out of them. But Falcons are interesting. I mean, when you replace basically your entire coaching staff, you get a new OC, a new DC, you get a new special teams coordinator. I mean, there's going to be a lot of unknown, at least from kind of a strategic standpoint about, now with Dan Quinn taking over and officially being the DC now. And, certainly going to be a much different look as you head into next year. But that at the end of the day, you're going to rely on, your backs in the backfield. You're going to rely on Matt Ryan. You're going to rely on Julio, finding ways to get Sanu involved. Obviously, your rookie wide receiver jumped out and had a big year. So I think you like the talent on the field. You just hope you can put them in a better position.
Do you feel like in these scenarios you talked about with Georgia and the Falcons, do you feel like change is good? Because usually when you keep everyone together for a long time, stuff starts to become stale.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think there's two ways. One is, are the people we're bringing in better than the people we're getting rid of, right? And you can get better. You can get better that way, obviously.
Right.
But sometimes you're right. Sometimes it's just kind of change for the sake of change. And is that just going to, spice things up a little bit, or get everyone to kind of buy back in? Feel like it's less of like, here we go again, or, and maybe guys commit a little differently to a new coaching staff. I think there's definitely some of that. I think when you get to that level, obviously everybody who's coaching the NFL is an extremely talented coach, right? Like, there's nobody there as an OC in the NFL who doesn't know what they're doing. But how players kind of gravitate to that coach, or how they buy in, or, you know, maybe how they adapt to his coaching style and how that fits. I mean, those things are important. And it's why you see some coaches have a lot of success at one team, but they can't do it at another team. It's not because they got worse, right? It didn't quite fit. So I think that's certainly what Dan Quinn's looking for is a fit, and hoping now he's got the right people in place to kind of shake things up, because I think anybody looking at that team feels like they have the talent to do it.
You know, I have so many questions, but unfortunately we're just running out of time. So where could we reach you on social media?
Sure. Twitter and Instagram are the go-tos for me. Both at QB Coach McAvoy. So QB Coach McAvoy on Twitter and Instagram.
He will answer questions on Instagram, just FYI, guys. So be sure to hit him up if you have any questions, anything that piques your curiosity through this conversation. Well, thanks for being on the show today, Sean.
Oh, absolutely, man. Great. By the way, I'm like on Twitter now as we're ending the call, and Georgia just made official the James Coley to OC.
Nice,
so
nice. Breaking news. The first ever breaking news on the ATL Box Score podcast.
We got it, man. We got it. Anyway, thanks, Alex. I'll look forward to talking to you soon, pal.
All right. I know this isn't really like football related, because here on Football Friday we only talk about football things, but I saw something cute in the AJC where they have bobbleheads now of different Atlanta United players with the Atlanta United Cup. So my goal eventually for the show is that it could be a show that we could do a live stream. Maybe not for every show, but eventually have that capability. So and also too, if we ever go on camera, I'd like to have some mementos around where people can see that it's like, oh, we're a sports show, kind of like what Dan Patrick has on his show. I always think all that junk's attractive, but it's decent eye candy when you're watching a live show. So I just thought we would end the show on that note. So that's definitely going to go in the Alex Burger collection sometime in the near future. But again, we just want to thank you guys for listening to the show, and especially for listening to this part of the show. But now's the time where we just want to ask you for your help, because we need your help, because this show is run by Atlanta sports fans. And one of the ways that you can help out is if you could hit the subscribe button. If you could either hit the subscribe button on Podbeam, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever you listen to this podcast, if you could hit the subscribe button and you want to hear more of the ATL Box Score, be sure to do that. The second thing you can do is like us or give us a 5-star rating, because that's the only way that we can grow the audience of this show. So like us on social media or Podbeam, or just about every podcasting platform that you listen to a podcast has some sort of like or has some sort of 5-star rating. If you could give us that, we would definitely appreciate that, because that would help us out tremendously, because we're trying to grow an audience the best we can, but we need your help in doing that as well. So it's extremely simple thing to do, and we would just greatly appreciate it. Thank you that you checked us out today. You've listened. You have an interest in Atlanta sports, and we're glad that you listened to the show today. And And also, too, comment in the comment section. I want to hear your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence in the national championship game. I want to hear your thoughts on what you think of Geoff Collins, Kirby Smart, Jim Chaney, all this football drama that happened in the past week or so. I mean, man, this has been an interesting football drama week without playing any games. So be sure to put that in the comment section. I'm tripping over my words here, but be sure to put that in the comment section, because we would greatly appreciate that, and we appreciate you guys checking out this podcast. And this is a great place to come if you just want to break from sports talk radio but want to hear about sports, want to hear about what's going on with Atlanta sports. So thanks for checking us out. We're a great medium. If you want to stop listening to sports talk radio. Also, too, the huge thing that would actually help us out tremendously, because we're a startup podcast, and obviously, the world is pretty much run on money and finance, and but we would definitely appreciate if you could just give us a donation on Patreon. And I'm going to put the link to the Patreon account. And I don't care if it's $5, $10, whatever. Any little bit that you could help this podcast, it'll go a long way. And I will be extremely grateful for your donation. We're kind of being like PBS. We're kind of being like PBS here. That for us to continue on doing our broadcast services, that we need your donation, but yeah, we would appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening, and we would love to hear feedback. We'd love to hear what you guys think of the show, and what you guys think we could do better, because we know we can always do stuff better, or have more of an interesting segue, or I know we said we're going on a winter break. Our schedule's kind of limbo right now. We're still trying to figure that out, but most likely we'll see you guys next week or the week after that. So be sure to be looking out for the next ATL Box Score podcast. So thanks, guys, for checking us out, and I hope you have an amazing weekend. Take care of yourself out there, and man, now you got to. It's going to be a basketball weekend, basketball all the way till baseball season starts now, or at least till MLS season. My bad for you MLS people out there. But hope you have a great weekend. And episode 16 is out.